Magda has been a Scrum Master for a couple years, I think since 2013 or so. And personally, she's a huge fan of Lego, like probably 99% of the people here in the meeting. So yeah, it's 11:51. So I have a pleasure and honor to introduce Magda with her topic regarding Scrum Master's misery. So Magda, stage is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'll start presenting my screen. My name is Magdalena Droździewicz, and I'm a Scrum Master, and it turns out that I'm also a pirate queen. Thank you, Janek, for that. So my story is titled From Scrum Master's Misery to Heaven, which is, of course, a direct reference to Janek's presentation, because I'm going to be talking about the very same theme. But when Janek was focusing on the mindset change and product owner point of view, I'm going to be focusing on the actions that we have taken and how we change the way we are working in order to unlock our full potential. So first, let me introduce you to the team. It's a very big team. We had mainly between 8 to 10 developers. It's a platform team, but the truth behind this sentence is that it was never a single product. Actually, it's over 20 components, and each one of them requires separate building process and separate expertise, so a lot of work here. Plus, when I joined the team, we were suffering from knowledge deficiency due to a lot of changes of ownership of those components and due to the fact that we have a lot of new team members. So, going back to the title, The Misery, how did it look like? Well, Janek did a great job introducing you to it already. So we had a lot of spillovers, up to 20 per sprint. And by spillover, I mean a task that was put into the sprint either at the planning or during the sprint, but hadn't been done within the sprint. So when the sprint is closed, it's simply pushed over to the next one, right? So usually around 15 up to 20 versus up to 15 tasks delivered. So not a very good proportion, right? We would get defects almost every sprint. And of course, we're considered a big bottleneck. Now moving to Heaven, which is the current state, this chart shows our last few sprints, and this dark blue color is how many tasks do we put into the sprint at the planning, and the dark green color, how many of them do we finish? So as you can see, 21, 21, 23, 23, 10, 10, 21, 21. So 100% success. And those light blue colors represent tasks that were added during the sprint, and light green colors, how many of them did we finish before the sprint has ended? And again, 100% success, so 100% reliability. And you're probably thinking right now, why is the sprint number 3 so odd? We have some availability issues with some people that has changed. So, but still, we have predicted very well how much can we deliver then. So this is not all. We didn't have any spillover in 2021 so far, and it's the middle of April, right? And we even have some time to help other teams and even to get involved in improving how our organization works. So the big question is, how is it even possible? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's given in the title of this conference and as well as in the first pages of the Scrum Guide, Empiricism. So how did we use it in our team? My personal approach is always to start with things that bother team the most. Why? Because, well, motivation is pretty high then. Plus, if you change it, you'll probably see a very big difference. Then you address a possible root cause. Simply experiment. And next, you observe what has changed. Next step is start with things that bother team the most. Address possible root cause, experiment, observe, and then, yeah, you guess it. Start with things that bother team the most, and so on and so on. So what was the first thing that we wanted to address? Those were those spillovers. We thought that we probably are taking too many tasks per sprint. Why? Well, there's probably something of our estimations. When I joined the team, we were using man days at the beginning, but you know, it's not the very best option, right? Because even if you're totally sure that a task will require 2 man days, and even if you're right, it would require 2 man days, it will probably not finish in 2 days. Why? Because we're not working in man days. We're working in real days. So we get fed of emails every day. We have planned meetings, unplanned meetings, chat messages, incoming voice calls, and so on and so on. And it all consumes a lot of time, not to mention the cost of context switching, right? It's pretty big. So we decided to start estimating in t-shirts. So we prepared a bunch of t-shirts from extra small to extra large. The question was how to translate t-shirts into giraffe-friendly language. So the answer was pretty obvious. Again, we were using Fibonacci sequence, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 story points. But there was still one challenge here. How to decide whether a task is small or medium or large? Where's the difference? Where's the line? Well, the problem, the usual answer is that you can pick an example task for each one of those t-shirts. But as we have so many new people in the team and so many components, it would be simply difficult to pick a single task that everyone would agree that, yes, this was a small task or a medium task. Luckily, a few years ago, I have come across a brilliant article on the internet, and I wanted to find it so much for you, but I simply couldn't. It got lost somewhere in the internet. But the article suggested that we should think about those estimations as time intervals. So it suggested that if you are sure that something will take less than 1 day, it's extra small task. If you think it will take 1 day to, well, maybe 3, something goes wrong, then you go with S, so 2 story points. 3 days for if something goes wrong, maybe 5, you go with M, and so on and so on. But to make things work well, we had to add 2 more rules. One was every item is estimated. And when I say every item, I mean also defects and support cases. And now I can hear you thinking, what? Why should you estimate a defect? Well, the thing was that we had a lot of work to do regarding defects and support cases every sprint. It was more that it could be fit into any buffer, plus the amounts of this work versus other tasks was changing from sprint to sprint. So we were basically estimating our future capacity based on incomplete data, and we didn't even know how incomplete it was. So we started to estimate every item. Okay, but now you're probably thinking, but Magda, how can you estimate a support case or a defect? You will have no idea how much time it will consume. Well, you're right. You can only guess. And then this is where our second rule comes in handy. We estimate if needed. So if you started with 2 story points with a defect, and then you realize that you've been working on it for 4 days already, then you simply change it to 3 story points, and that's it. Okay, so did it help? Sure it did. It was way better, but somehow the tasks would get stuck in the columns review and resolved. Those are the 2 states that required some cooperation between teammates, right? So we figured that the next root cause we will try to address probably is our daily Scrum. So it's not effective as it should be. Well, before that, we were using those typical 3 questions. What I did yesterday, what I'm going to be doing today, what impediments do I see? But we saw that it's not working, so we have created our own way of doing daily Scrum. Before I tell you how we do it, a brief introduction to our Scrum board. There are a bunch of typical columns, but one probably needs some comments. This is result validation. Because we have so many components, we usually build few things every sprint. So here, tasks that have been resolved are parked. They are waiting for other tasks that are prepared for the same build, the same component. And when they are all resolved, we can build it and test it all together. And afterwards, it can be moved to column done, it's closed. So instead of answering those 3 questions, so doing a typical round through people, we started doing rounds through the board, starting from column right, the top right column, which is done, and moving forward to the other columns. So first we would ask, about column done. Do we see any tasks that require re-estimation? So yeah, this is the re-estimating rule I mentioned a few minutes ago. Next, we would look at column locked and ask ourselves, can we unblock something? Next, we would look at column resolve validation and check whether we can build something today. And if yes, who will build it and who will test it today? Next, we would move to column review and check whether there are any tasks in there. If yes, who will do the code review today? So as you can see, we switched the focus to finishing tasks instead of starting more tasks, right? And only after asking those questions, we would look at the column in progress and just simply say about any impediments we have, or do we have anything to discuss today? So did it help? Yes, it did. But still some tasks would get stuck in resolved column. Why? Because building and testing was time consuming. Sometimes it would take even up to 3 days. So we simply couldn't afford to build and test everything we had in our sprint. So the team came with a brilliant idea to change the way we plan our sprint from looking at the task to looking at the releases. So instead of simply choosing most important task, we'd choose most important releases and then put into the sprint only tasks that we can actually build or that doesn't require build at all. So yeah, it was going better and better, but we are facing some more issues. For example, still some unexpected things can happen and we don't have resources to deal with it. So we started using a buffer. So at the planning, when we have our estimated capacity for this sprint, we would plan only 90% of it and leave the remaining 10 for unexpected things. Next observation was that things get sometimes overlooked at planning, and that's refinement. So not to forget about them, we started the planning checklist and we introduced a story template. Regarding this planning checklist is a funny story because we started with 6 points on this checklist, and right now we have 28 points at this planning checklist. It's a lot, but when we start the sprint, we feel like a pilot before taking off. We go one by one through all of those points, and we make sure that we can fly safely, and it really makes a big change. Next thing, we realized that it's high time we do some automation because it's not very efficient to do over and over again manually the same things, right? But on the other hand, we couldn't afford to spend a few sprints on automating. So that's why we introduced this improvement thought that Janek was already talking about. So each task, each sprint, we would take at least one task per automation or improvement or refactor, something like this. And in the end, we had to face a problem no one expected we would have to face, which was, oh, wow, we finished early. What to do with the remaining time? So the first idea was, let's simply start doing tasks from the next sprint, right? But guess what? We would end up with spillovers again because we couldn't finish them on time. So instead, we decided that we'll have a bucket of small tasks prepared. And by this, I mean that we always have some small tasks that we can always put into the sprint. They can be as small as 1 day or 2 days, right? So 1 story point, 2 story points. So the rule is if we have to add something into the sprint, we have to be sure that we can finish before the sprint is closed. Okay, so that was a lot of plain talking. Now the question is, can we actually see it somehow on the chart? Well, yes, we can. This is a cumulative flow diagram from Jira, but I altered it so it shows only stories that are in progress, in review, or resolve validation state. So they have been started but not finished yet, right, over the time. So at the beginning of a sprint, you expect no stories to be in those states. So there should be 0 at the chart. And the same at the end of the sprint. So what can we see here? At the beginning, when I joined, we couldn't actually see on this chart where one sprint has ended and the other is starting, right? It's like a flow of tasks. Here's when we were experimenting with estimations and daily Scrum, and you can see that the number of tasks that are started is dropping. Here's when we introduced the release planning. So for the first time, we have no task in resolved validation state. So huge success back then. This big difference here is when we started using the buffer. Next one, planning checklist. It's a very long frame because it was constantly evolving. And improvements dot. And here is the last one, and it's small tasks bucket. So as you can see in the end of this journey, you can clearly see when on this chart when one sprint is starting and the other is finishing. So really big difference. Okay, so a lot have changed through this over year period of time, but it wouldn't be possible without teamwork. This was the key ingredient for us. And by teamwork, I mean that all the team was involved in creating those actions and in changing how we work. Everyone feels responsible for it. And whenever something bad happens or someone forgets about something that we agreed on, the team reacts instantly. Plus, we all help one another. So this is perfect moment for me to stop for a while and to address my teammates. Guys, if you are listening, you are truly awesome. Thank you. Now moving to the summary. So don't estimate in Mondays. It's road to nowhere. Find your way to do daily Scrum. Switch to release planning. Have a buffer. It really helps. It makes huge difference. Start a planning checklist. Plan an improvement slot. Be prepared for being successful, so have some small tasks in your backlog prepared. Remember, teamwork is the key, and experiment, experiment, experiment. Thank you, and now let's Q&A. So,
yes. Oh, okay. So you can share the screen. Awesome. Yeah, I can see.
Yes. Can you see the Slack?
I can see it.
Okay, cool. So what do we have here? Can you share your planning checklist? I used something similar. I'd like to compare mine with yours. Well, we have a lot of very specific items on that list, so it wouldn't be helpful for most of you, but I can write it down here in Slack some of the points that are probably universal for all teams. So yes, I can add it in a moment, okay? Okay, how do you handle bugs out of production? Do you drop other tasks then? Well, for this, we have this buffer, right? 10% of time set apart. So if we have bug or defect and we know we can handle it right now, we simply do it. But if it's not very urgent one, if we know that it could wait some time because the impact is not high, then we can plan it for the next sprint. If re-estimation is really needed within the current sprint, yeah, so that's a good question. Let me read it to the end. We always can use the knowledge to make better estimation for simultaneous. Yeah, theoretically, yes, but somehow it really worked for us, this re-estimating current sprint, because then we had complete data of this current sprint and we could estimate our future capacity better, right? Because we knew exactly how many story points did we deliver, what was our availability in the sprint, so we can count our velocity, how many story points per Monday can we deliver approximately. And then we count our availability in the upcoming sprint, and we can calculate how many story points we will probably deliver. And it really works great for us, so we are stuck with it. The curve seems to be thicker generally in the beginning. Yeah, it was. I understand predictably is a great plus, but it suggests there is space for more. Yes and no, because it was thicker indeed, but it meant that there were so many tasks in progress. It doesn't mean that we have done more within the sprint, right? Right now, the tasks are moving more smoothly through the board. So actually, if you would count how many story points do we deliver twice as much story points right now than we did back then. because you can see this on the chart because those tasks are moving so smoothly through the board. Is estimating needed at all? Yeah, that's a good question. I know for many teams, it's not needed at all because you have like a number of tasks that you deliver every sprint on average, and you can base your planning on that only. And from time to time, I do the research on, I look through our sprints and change whether we have such situation right now. And no, we do not yet, but probably we'll get there at some point. How much your sprint plan evolved during sprints? Sprint plan. So if this is the question about how much tasks do we add during the sprint, how much we change how we think we'll work during the sprint, not much. I mean, when we start the sprint, I'm not saying it's set in stone, but usually we have picked everything that was needed to pick at the beginning, at the planning, so we don't have to put anything more in there. Sometimes we do, and then we add another point to our checklist. I hope that answered your question, Michał. If not, please write me and I'll address it. Okay, any more questions? Did you face resistance from the team at the beginning? Yeah, the one guy was really hard to work with, right? I'm looking at Janek right now. No, I'm joking, of course. The team is truly awesome. I mean, they felt the need to change, although they didn't believe at the beginning that such a difference is even possible. But yes, it was. Oh, I got clapping from my teammate. Thank you. Okay, so how to deal with skeptical teammates? Talk with them. If they're skeptical, that means that something in the past have happened that made them skeptical, right? So simply talk with them about it and show what is your purpose, what is your goal. Ask how can you help him? Because you know, in the end, Scrum Master is guy responsible for having impediments removed, not being one of those impediments, right? So don't try to push hard, just talk with people, coach them, explain, and listen to them. Small follow-up, what kind of percentage of tasks in your sprint contributes to your sprint goals? That differs a lot. Sometimes it's half of them, and sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. It's really changing a lot. Do you set up sprint goals as a guidance for the team? Yeah, sure we do. We start every planning with that. So every planning starts with a keynote from our beloved product owner, and then we decide what should be our sprint goal. Then we go through this checklist and through the backlog and so on and so on. And at the end, we go back to the sprint goal and check whether we have everything important put in there. Is it still all right? So yeah, always a sprint goal.
Somebody's typing.
Yes.
Uh,
Thanks. Thank you too.
Yeah, okay. I'm wondering if this is the right moment to conclude your presentation, Magda, and let people go to the lunch break, or we still expect.
Probably everyone is pretty hungry right now. So guys, should you have any more questions, just type them on Slack and I'll stick around.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Magda. We all appreciate your honest, sincere, and very personal presentation. So both yours and Janek's, because they are a couple.